My son-in-law tried to poison me at Sunday dinner. I watched him do it with my own eyes, and I said nothing. I just sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, watching him slip something into my wine glass while everyone else was arguing about the football game. The bastard thought I was too old, too trusting, too naive to notice. He was wrong about everything except one thing: I was definitely too old to let it slide. If you've ever had someone you considered family look you dead in the eye and smile, while they're planning your destruction, then hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happened next will make you question everyone sitting at your own dinner table. My name is Jeremiah Caldwell, and I'm 72 years old. I've survived 3 wars, buried 2 wives, raised 4 children, and built a construction empire from nothing but calloused hands and stubborn determination. I thought I'd seen every kind of betrayal a man could face. I was wrong. The worst betrayal was waiting for me in my own dining room, served up with my daughter's famous pot roast. It was October 15th, 2023. I remember the date because it was supposed to be a celebration. My youngest daughter Sarah had just gotten promoted to senior partner at her law firm, and the whole family was gathered at my house in Millbrook, Tennessee. The leaves outside were turning that deep amber color that reminds you winter's coming whether you're ready or not. Inside, my dining room was warm with laughter and the smell of Sarah's cooking. She'd inherited her mother's gift for making a house feel like home. But something was off that night. I could feel it in my bones the way old men feel rain coming. My son-in-law Derek, Sarah's husband of 8 years, kept checking his phone and glancing at me with this strange intensity. Not hostile, exactly, but calculating. Like he was measuring something I couldn't see. Derek Hutchinson was 34 years old, handsome in that smooth, corporate way that made people trust him instantly. He worked in pharmaceutical sales, drove a BMW he couldn't quite afford, and had a smile that never quite reached his eyes. I'd never liked him, but I'd kept my mouth shut because Sarah loved him. Or thought she did. The first sign something was wrong came during dessert. Sarah had made her grandmother's apple pie, and we were all sitting around the table telling stories and laughing. My other children were there too, my oldest son Michael with his wife Linda, my middle daughter Rebecca, and my youngest son David with his new girlfriend Katie. 3 generations of Caldwells, all together under one roof. It should have been perfect. That's when Derek started talking about my health. "Jerry's been looking tired lately," he said, cutting into his pie with surgical precision. "Maybe you should consider slowing down a bit, old man. You're not getting any younger." The way he said old man made my skin crawl. Not affectionate, like my grandkids would say it. Cold. Clinical. Like he was diagnosing a problem. "I feel fine," I told him, which was mostly true. Sure, my knees ached when it rained, and I couldn't read the small print without my glasses anymore, but I was still working construction sites every day. Still lifting, still building, still showing men half my age how it was done. "That's what they all say," Derek replied, and there was something in his voice that made everyone else at the table go quiet. "Until they don't." My son Michael jumped in to change the subject, talking about his youngest boy's baseball season, but I kept watching Derek. He kept checking his phone, kept glancing at his watch, kept looking at me with that calculating stare. And then, during the coffee service, I saw him do it. Sarah was in the kitchen getting the cream, and everyone else was focused on Rebecca telling some story about her new job at the hospital. Derek reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small vial, clear glass, about the size of my thumb. He twisted off the cap with practiced ease and dumped the contents into my wine glass. The liquid was colorless, odorless, and it dissolved instantly into the red wine. He did it right in front of everyone, bold as brass, counting on the fact that nobody was watching him. Nobody except me. My heart started hammering in my chest like a 16-pound sledge against concrete. My hands were shaking so bad I had to put my coffee cup down before I dropped it. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. Because I needed to understand what was happening, and more importantly, I needed to figure out how to survive it. Derek slipped the vial back into his pocket and looked up to find me staring at him. For just a moment, his mask slipped, and I saw something cold and predatory in his eyes. Then he smiled that pharmaceutical sales smile, and raised his own wine glass. "To family," he said, looking directly at me. The son of a bitch was toasting my murder. That's when it hit me, this wasn't random. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of madness. This was planned. Calculated. He'd brought poison to my family dinner with the specific intention of killing me, and he was arrogant enough to think he could get away with it. But why? What did I ever do to Derek Hutchinson except fail to kiss his ass the way everyone else seemed to? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? I looked around the table at my family, my children, my daughter-in-law, David's girlfriend, all of them laughing and talking and completely oblivious to the fact that someone was trying to commit murder right under their noses. Sarah was just coming back from the kitchen with the cream, smiling that beautiful smile that reminded me so much of her mother. She had no idea she'd married a killer. Or did she? The thought hit me like a punch to the gut. Was Sarah in on this? Was my own daughter part of a plot to kill her father? I studied her face as she sat back down, looking for any sign of guilt or nervousness. But all I saw was happiness. She was genuinely enjoying this family gathering, genuinely proud of her promotion, genuinely in love with the man who just poisoned her father's wine. No. Sarah wasn't part of this. Which meant she was in danger too. Because if Derek was willing to kill me, what would he do to her if she got in his way? My wine glass sat there in front of me, innocent as Sunday morning, filled with death. Derek kept glancing at it, then at me, waiting for me to drink. The conversation flowed around us like nothing had changed, but everything had changed. The whole world had shifted on its axis, and I was the only one who knew it. I picked up my glass and swirled the wine, watching it catch the light from the chandelier. Derek's eyes never left me. He was practically holding his breath, waiting for me to take that first sip. "You know," I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I've been thinking about updating my will." The table went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of people listening to a good story, but the awkward quiet of people who don't want to talk about death and money. Derek's face went pale. That's morbid dinner conversation, don't you think?" "Nothing morbid about it," I replied, still swirling my wine. "Man my age needs to keep his affairs in order. Never know what might happen." I watched Derek's Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard. Interesting. Very interesting. "Besides," I continued, "I've been thinking about making some changes. Maybe leaving the business to someone who really understands construction. Someone with experience. Someone I can trust." Derek's jaw clenched. "I thought you were planning to leave everything to your children." "Plans change," I said simply. And that's when I knew for certain why Derek Hutchinson wanted me dead. It wasn't personal hatred or psychotic impulses. It was money. My money. The construction company I'd built from nothing was worth millions, and Derek thought he could cash in through Sarah. But only if I died before I changed my will. The greedy bastard had underestimated me in every possible way. I set down my wine glass without drinking and excused myself to the bathroom. I needed time to think, time to plan, time to figure out how to turn this situation to my advantage. Because I wasn't just going to survive Derek's murder attempt, I was going to destroy him for it. The hallway to the bathroom felt longer than usual, and I could feel Derek's eyes burning into my back. He was probably wondering why I hadn't drunk the wine yet, probably calculating how long his poison would take to work, probably already planning his performance of shock and grief when his father-in-law mysteriously collapsed at the dinner table. But as I stood in that bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't looking at a victim. I was looking at a predator. And after 72 years of life, I knew exactly how to hunt. Standing in that bathroom, I could hear my family's voices drifting down the hallway, normal conversation, laughter, the clink of silverware against china. They had no idea that Death was sitting at our dinner table, wearing a pressed shirt and a pharmaceutical sales smile. But I knew. And knowing changed everything. I splashed cold water on my face and looked at myself hard in the mirror. 72 years old, gray beard, hands scarred from decades of construction work, eyes that had seen too much of the world's ugliness. I looked like someone's harmless grandfather. Derek was counting on that. He was counting on me being too old, too trusting, too naive to see him coming. He was about to learn that appearances can be deceiving. See, there's something Derek didn't know about his father-in-law. Something Sarah had never told him because it wasn't the kind of story you share over cocktails. Before I built Caldwell Construction, before I became the respectable businessman everyone saw at church on Sundays, I spent 3 years in Vietnam. And Vietnam taught me things about human nature that no business school could ever cover. It taught me that the most dangerous enemy is the one who smiles at you while planning your death. It taught me that survival isn't about being the strongest or the fastest, it's about being the smartest and the most patient. And it taught me that when someone declares war on you, you don't fight fair. You fight to win. Derek Hutchinson had just declared war on me. He just didn't know I'd already started fighting back. I dried my hands and walked back toward the dining room, but I stopped in the kitchen first. Sarah was there, rinsing dishes at the sink, humming softly to herself. She looked so happy, so content with her life. It broke my heart to know what was coming. "Sarah, honey," I said quietly, "can I ask you something?" She turned around, dish towel in her hands, that bright smile lighting up her face. "Of course, Dad. What's on your mind? How are things between you and Derek?" "Really?" The smile flickered, just for a moment. "What do you mean?" "I mean money. Finances. Are you two doing okay?" She sighed and leaned against the counter. "We're managing. Derek's job pays well, but well, you know how it is. The house payment, the cars, everything's so expensive these days." She paused. "Why do you ask?" "Just wondering. You know I worry about you kids." She came over and kissed my cheek. "You don't need to worry about us, Dad. We're fine. And Derek's been talking about some big opportunities coming up at work. He says we might be able to pay off the house early." "Big opportunities." "Right. I bet he was counting on some kind of windfall. Like an inheritance from a father-in-law who died tragically and unexpectedly at Sunday dinner." "That's good to hear," I told her. "You deserve to be happy." "I am happy," she said, and I believed her. Which made what I had to do next even harder. I walked back to the dining room and took my seat. Derek looked up immediately, his eyes going straight to my wine glass. Still full. Still untouched. I could see the anxiety starting to build in his face. "Everything all right, Jerry?" he asked, his voice just a little too casual. "Perfect," I said, picking up the glass and holding it up to the light. "This is good wine. Where did you get it?" "Sarah picked it out," he said quickly. I looked at my daughter. "Did you open this bottle tonight?" "No, actually Derek brought it. He said it was a special vintage he'd been saving for a celebration." She smiled at her husband. "Wasn't that thoughtful?" "Thoughtful. Jesus Christ." Derek had brought the wine. Which meant he'd planned this whole thing in advance. He'd probably bought the poison weeks ago, maybe months ago, waiting for the right opportunity. And he thought a family dinner would be perfect. Everyone would be witnesses to my tragic, inexplicable collapse. No one would suspect murder. Just a sad case of an old man's heart giving out. Except I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. "It's delicious," I said, still holding the glass without drinking. "Complex. Lots of layers." Derek's hands were starting to shake. Maybe we should clear the table. It's getting late." "No rush," I said. "I'm enjoying the conversation. You know, Derek, I've been thinking about what you said earlier. About my health. About slowing down." His eyes sharpened. "Oh? Yeah. Maybe you're right. Maybe I should start thinking about retirement. Start thinking about passing the business on to the next generation." The whole table was listening now. This was the kind of conversation that got everyone's attention: money, inheritance, the future of the family empire. That's a big decision, Dad, Michael said carefully. It is, I agreed. And I want to make sure I choose the right person. Someone who understands what this business really means. Someone who shares the family values. I was watching Derek's face as I spoke, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was probably calculating how much the business was worth, how long it would take to liquidate the assets, how he could convince Sarah to move somewhere far away from Tennessee where nobody would ask uncomfortable questions about her father's sudden death. Family is everything, Derek said, leaning forward intently. Blood is thicker than water. Blood, I repeated slowly. That's an interesting choice of words. Something cold flickered in his eyes, but his smile never wavered. Just an expression. Of course it is. I raised my wine glass again. To family. Derek raised his glass too, and for a moment we just stared at each other across the table. Two old predators recognizing each other for what we really were. The rest of the family joined the toast, completely oblivious to the deadly game being played out in front of them. But I still didn't drink. You know what? I said, setting down my glass again. I think I've had enough wine for tonight. Don't want to overdo it at my age. Derek's face went white. Are you sure? It's really exceptional wine. I'm sure. But I hate to waste it. I looked around the table. Anyone else want to finish this? The moment stretched out like a held breath. This was it. This was the test. If Derek really believed his own act, if he really thought I was just being cautious about alcohol, he wouldn't object to someone else drinking from my glass. But if he knew what was in that wine... I'll take it, Rebecca said, reaching for my glass. No! Derek's voice cracked like a whip across the table. Everyone jumped, including Rebecca, who pulled her hand back like she'd been burned. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that dining room. Everyone was staring at Derek, who realized he just made a terrible mistake. I mean, he said, trying to recover, it's Jerry's wine. He might want it later. It's fine, I said quietly. Rebecca can have it. Actually, Derek said, standing up so fast his chair scraped against the floor, I think we should probably head home. It's getting late, and I have an early meeting tomorrow. Sarah looked confused. But we haven't had coffee yet. And I made that chocolate cake you love. We can take some home, Derek said, already pulling out his phone. I just remembered I have some calls to make tonight. Important calls. He was panicking. The smooth, confident pharmaceutical salesman was falling apart right in front of us, and he didn't even realize it. But I realized something else. He was dangerous. A panicked predator is the most dangerous kind. Of course, I said, standing up slowly. Family first, right, Derek? He looked at me with pure hatred then, not even trying to hide it anymore. Right. Family first. As they gathered their coats and said their goodbyes, I pulled Derek aside in the hallway. Just the two of us, grandfather and grandson-in-law, having what looked like a normal conversation. Derek, I said quietly, I want you to know something. What's that? I stepped closer, close enough that only he could hear me. Close enough that he could see the absolute certainty in my eyes. I know what you put in my wine. His face went completely still. No shock, no denial, no confusion. Just cold calculation. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. The question is, what are you going to do about it now? We stared at each other for a long moment. Two old wolves sizing each other up. Then Derek smiled, but it wasn't his pharmaceutical sales smile anymore. It was something much more honest. Much more dangerous. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Jerry. Oh, I will. And Derek? Next time you come to my house for dinner, I'll be sure to choose the wine myself. He walked away without another word, taking Sarah with him into the night. I watched their taillights disappear down my driveway and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. The war had officially begun. After everyone left, I sat alone in my kitchen with that glass of poisoned wine in front of me like evidence in a murder trial. The house felt too quiet, too empty, filled with the ghost of normal family conversation and the echo of Derek's threat. Because that's what his parting words had been, a threat. We both knew it. I called my oldest friend, Tommy Rodriguez, a retired police detective who owed me more favors than either of us could count. Tommy had worked narcotics for 20 years before moving to homicide, and if anyone could tell me what Derek had slipped into my wine, it was him. Jerry? Jesus, it's almost midnight. What's wrong? I need a favor, Tommy. A big one. And I need you to keep it quiet. There was a pause. Tommy had heard that tone in my voice before, back when we were both younger, and the world was trying to kill us in more obvious ways. What do you need? I need you to test something for poison. Something that was meant for me. Another pause, longer this time. Where are you? Home. Don't touch anything. Don't drink anything. Don't eat anything. I'm coming over. Tommy showed up 20 minutes later with a kit that looked like it belonged in a CSI episode. He was 68 years old, gray-haired and thick around the middle, but his eyes were still sharp as broken glass. He took one look at the wine glass and whistled low. Who's trying to kill you, Jerry? My son-in-law. Derek? The pharmaceutical guy. Tommy had met Derek at a few family gatherings over the years. What the hell for? I told him everything. The suspicious behavior, the vial, the way Derek had panicked when Rebecca reached for the wine glass. Tommy listened without interrupting, his cop face giving nothing away. When I finished, he nodded grimly. We'll need to test this properly, but I can tell you right now what it probably is. Pharmaceutical sales guys have access to all kinds of nasty stuff. Could be anything from digitalis to ricin to some kind of synthetic compound. How long would it take to kill me? Depends on what it is and how much he used. Could be minutes, could be hours. Could be designed to look like a heart attack or a stroke. He sealed the wine glass in an evidence bag with practiced efficiency. The good news is you didn't drink it. The bad news is this bastard is going to try again. That's what I'd been afraid of. Derek wasn't the type to give up after one failed attempt. He was calculating, patient, determined. And now he knew that I knew. What are my options? I asked. Tommy looked at me hard. Legally? We could try to get him arrested, but without a confession or more evidence, it's going to be tough. A good lawyer could argue that you never actually saw him put anything in the wine, that you're just a paranoid old man with failing eyesight. And illegally? Jerry, I'm not asking you to do anything, Tommy. I'm just asking for your professional opinion about what a man in my position might do to protect himself. Tommy was quiet for a long time. Finally, he sighed. If it was me? If someone tried to poison me in my own home, in front of my family? I'd want to know everything about them. Their habits, their weaknesses, their secrets. Because everyone has secrets, Jerry. Everyone has something they don't want the world to know. How would a man go about finding those secrets? Hypothetically? Private investigator might be a good start. Someone discreet. Someone who specializes in digging up dirt on people who think they're too smart to get caught. I knew exactly who he was talking about. Maria Santos had been working private investigation in Nashville for 15 years, ever since she left the FBI under circumstances nobody talked about. She was expensive, ruthless, and absolutely merciless when it came to exposing people's hidden lives. Thanks, Tommy. Jerry, be careful. This Derek character is already willing to commit murder. If he feels cornered, there's no telling what he might do next. That was exactly what I was counting on. The next morning, I drove to Nashville and walked into Maria Santos's office like I was hiring someone to find a lost dog. She was 43 years old, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Her office was all glass and steel, cold and professional, the kind of place where secrets came to die. Mr. Caldwell, she said, looking up from her computer. I've heard of you. Caldwell Construction. You built half of Nashville. I need your help with a family matter. Her eyebrows went up slightly. Family matters can be the most complicated kind. What exactly do you need? I slid a check across her desk. More money than she probably saw in 3 months. Her expression didn't change, but I saw her eyes sharpen. I need to know everything about Derek Hutchinson. Where he goes, who he talks to, what he does when he thinks nobody's watching. I need to know about his finances, his habits, his secrets. I need to know what kind of man my daughter married. How deep do you want me to go? All the way to the bottom. She smiled then, and it wasn't a nice smile. That's my specialty. Maria Santos was worth every penny I paid her. Within a week, she had assembled a file on Derek Hutchinson that would have made the FBI proud. And what she found was worse than I'd imagined. Derek wasn't just greedy. He was desperate. His pharmaceutical sales job was barely keeping him afloat, and he'd been borrowing money from dangerous people to maintain the lifestyle he thought he deserved. He owed $40,000 to a loan shark named Vincent Coretti, with interest compounding daily. The BMW was leased and 3 months behind on payments. The house was mortgaged to the hilt and heading toward foreclosure. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the affairs. Derek had been cheating on my daughter for over 2 years. Multiple women, including at least 3 clients from his pharmaceutical route. He'd been telling them the same sob story: unhappy marriage, planning to leave his wife as soon as he could afford the divorce, just needed time to get his finances in order. One of those women was Angela Morrison, a 32-year-old nurse who worked at Nashville General. According to Maria's surveillance, Derek had been promising to marry Angela for 8 months. He'd even given her a ring, a cheap cubic zirconia thing he'd probably bought at a pawn shop. But here's where it got interesting. Angela Morrison was pregnant. 3 months along, according to her medical records that Maria had somehow obtained. And Derek was the father. So Derek Hutchinson wasn't just trying to murder me for money. He was trying to murder me so he could divorce Sarah, marry his pregnant mistress, and use my inheritance to start a whole new life. He probably thought he was being clever, solving all his problems with one well-timed poisoning. He had no idea he just handed me everything I needed to destroy him. But I wasn't ready to move yet. I needed more. I needed him to make another attempt, something we could catch on camera. Something that would give me options. So I did something that probably sounds crazy to anyone who's never been in a real war. I made myself vulnerable. I started going to the same places every day at the same times. I established patterns that Derek could track. I made myself an easy target. And I waited. If you've ever hunted deer, you know that the best way to get a clean shot is to make the animal come to you. You set up your blind, you put out bait, and you wait with the patience of a stone. The deer thinks it's safe, thinks it's found an easy meal. It doesn't realize it's walking into a trap until it's too late. Derek Hutchinson was about to learn that I'd been hunting things a lot more dangerous than deer. 3 days after I got Maria's report, Derek made his move. I was having lunch at Miller's Diner on Highway 41, the same booth I'd been sitting in every day for a week. I ordered the same thing: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, sweet tea. I read the same newspaper, left the same tip, took the same route home. Derek was in the parking lot when I came out, sitting in that damn BMW like he was waiting for someone. He followed me home, staying back just far enough to think I wouldn't notice. But I'd been watching for him, and I'd been ready. I pulled into my driveway and went inside, leaving the front door unlocked. Because I wanted him to come in. I wanted him to try again. I wanted to catch him in the act. What I wasn't expecting was what happened next. What I wasn't expecting was Sarah's phone call. "Dad?" Her voice was shaking. "Dad, I need to talk to you. Something's wrong. Something's really wrong." "What is it, honey?" "It's Derek. I found something. I found something terrible." Sarah showed up at my house 20 minutes later, clutching a manila folder like it contained the secrets of the universe. Her face was pale, her hands were shaking, and she looked like someone who just discovered that everything she believed about her life was a lie. Which, as it turned out, was exactly what had happened. "Dad, I need to show you something." she said, sitting down at my kitchen table. But first I need to ask you a question, and I need you to tell me the truth. Always, honey. What's wrong? She opened the folder and pulled out a stack of photographs. My heart started racing because I recognized them. They were surveillance photos from Maria Santos's investigation. Pictures of Derek with Angela Morrison. Pictures of them kissing, holding hands, going into hotel rooms together. Did you have Derek followed? There was no point in lying. She'd already seen the evidence. Yes. Why? I looked at my daughter, my youngest, my baby, the one who'd always believed the best about everyone, and realized I was about to break her heart. But she deserved the truth. Because I thought he was trying to kill me. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. Sarah stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her mind working, processing, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. Kill you? Dad, that's crazy. Why would Derek want to kill you? So I told her. I told her about the wine, about the vial, about Derek's panic when Rebecca reached for my glass. I told her about the money troubles, about Vincent Coretti, about the house payments and the BMW lease and all the lies her husband had been telling. And then I told her about Angela Morrison and the baby. Sarah listened to everything without interrupting, her face getting paler and paler as the full scope of Derek's betrayal became clear. When I finished, she was crying, not the loud, dramatic sobbing you see in movies, but the quiet, broken crying of someone whose world has just collapsed. I'm so sorry, honey. He's been lying to me about everything, she whispered. Everything. The job, the money, the other women. Even the ring he gave me when he proposed. I found the receipt in his dresser drawer. He bought it at a pawn shop for $60. How did you get these photos? She wiped her eyes. They were in his car. Hidden under the spare tire. Along with this. She pulled out another item from the folder, a small glass vial, identical to the one I'd seen Derek use at dinner. This one was empty, but there was a label on the side with some kind of medical terminology I couldn't pronounce. I found 3 of these, she said. All empty. And there were receipts from a medical supply company in Memphis. Dad, I think you're right. I think he really was trying to kill you. I took the vial and held it up to the light. The label said, Digitalis purpurea 10 milligrams per milliliter. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew it wasn't vitamins. There's more, Sarah said quietly. More what? More evidence. I went through his computer, his phone, his email. Everything. She pulled out a thick stack of printouts. He's been planning this for months. There are internet searches for poisons, for how to make a death look natural, for how long it takes life insurance policies to pay out. My blood went cold. Life insurance? He took out a policy on you 6 months ago. Through his company's group plan. He said it was just to make sure the family would be taken care of if something happened to you. The beneficiary is me, but he's listed as the secondary. How much? $2 million. Jesus Christ. Derek hadn't just been planning to murder me, he'd been planning to profit from it to the tune of $2 million. Plus whatever he could get from liquidating my construction business and selling my house. Sarah, we need to call the police. No. Her voice was hard now, cold in a way I'd never heard before. Not yet. What do you mean, not yet? She looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes that reminded me of her mother. Elizabeth had been the sweetest woman in the world, but when someone hurt her family, she could be absolutely ruthless. I mean, I want to destroy him first. I want to take everything from him the way he was planning to take everything from us. She leaned forward. Dad, I'm a lawyer. I know how the system works. Even with all this evidence, there's a chance he could get a plea deal, serve a few years, and walk away. I don't want him to walk away. I want him to suffer. If you've ever had a child surprise you with their capacity for strategic thinking, you know exactly what I felt in that moment. Pride, concern, and a little bit of fear. Because Sarah wasn't talking about justice anymore. She was talking about revenge. And God help me, I was proud of her for it. What did you have in mind? She smiled, and it was Derek's pharmaceutical sales smile turned inside out. Cold, calculating, and absolutely merciless. I want to give him exactly what he wants. I want him to think his plan is working. And then I want to watch him destroy himself trying to cover it up. Over the next 2 hours, Sarah laid out a plan that would have impressed Sun Tzu himself. It was elegant, brutal, and completely legal. We were going to let Derek think he'd succeeded in killing me, let him start the process of claiming the life insurance money, and then reveal that I was alive at the exact moment when he'd committed the most insurance fraud. But first, we needed bait. We needed to give him another opportunity to try to poison me, and we needed to catch him doing it on camera. He'll try again, Sarah said. Probably soon. He's desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. How can you be sure? Because I'm going to make him desperate. Tonight I'm going to tell him that you've decided to change your will. That you're leaving everything to Michael instead of splitting it between the 4 of us. And I'm going to tell him that you're meeting with your lawyer tomorrow to make it official. It was perfect. Derek would realize he was running out of time, that his window for murder and profit was closing fast. He'd have to move immediately, and when he did, we'd be ready. There's one more thing, Sarah said quietly. I want to handle Angela Morrison myself. Sarah. No, Dad. This is personal now. That woman is carrying my husband's baby while he's planning to murder my father. She needs to know what kind of man she's involved with. I could see that arguing would be pointless. Sarah had inherited her mother's protective instincts along with her strategic mind, and Derek had made the mistake of threatening both her father and her marriage. He was about to discover that the Caldwell women were not to be underestimated. We spent the rest of the afternoon setting up surveillance cameras around my house. Tiny, wireless things that Maria Santos had recommended. Sarah positioned them herself, her legal mind thinking through every angle, every possible defense Derek might try to use. Kitchen, dining room, front hallway, she said, checking each camera on her phone app. We'll have multiple angles of whatever he tries to do. What about sound? Audio too. Full HD video with crystal clear sound. When this goes to court, the jury will see and hear everything. As the sun started to set, Sarah gathered up all the evidence, the photos, the vials, the insurance documents, everything that proved Derek's guilt. She was going to confront him tonight, but not the way he'd expect. Be careful, honey. If he's willing to commit murder, there's no telling what else he might do. She kissed my cheek. Don't worry about me, Dad. Worry about Derek. He has no idea what's coming. After she left, I sat alone in my house, watching the sun disappear behind the hills and thinking about how quickly everything had changed. 24 hours ago, I'd been a grandfather enjoying Sunday dinner with his family. Now I was a target in a murder plot, planning the destruction of my son-in-law with the help of my own daughter. War makes philosophers of us all, I suppose. My phone rang at 9:30. Sarah. It's done, she said. I told him everything you wanted me to tell him. About the will, about the lawyer's appointment, about leaving everything to Michael. He tried to hide it, but I could see the panic in his eyes. How did he react? He asked a lot of questions about the timing, about when you were planning to meet with the lawyer. And then he said he thought we should have dinner with you again soon. Maybe tomorrow night. To try to change your mind. Perfect. Derek was walking right into the trap. Did you tell him I'd agreed to dinner? I told him you seemed open to the idea. That you always liked having the family together. He's already planning something, Dad. I could see it in his face. And Angela Morrison? Sarah's voice turned ice cold. I'm seeing her tomorrow morning. At the hospital where she works. We're going to have a very interesting conversation. After we hung up, I double-checked all the cameras, made sure my phone was fully charged, and settled in to wait. Derek would probably come tomorrow night, during dinner, using the same method that had almost worked before. But this time, we'd be ready. This time, he was going to hand us everything we needed to destroy him. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept thinking about Sarah, about how quickly she'd transformed from grieving wife to ruthless strategist. Part of me was proud of her strength, but part of me was worried about what this revenge would cost her. Once you cross certain lines, once you embrace that cold calculation necessary for real warfare, it's hard to find your way back to the person you used to be. But Derek had made his choice when he brought poison to my dinner table. And now we were all going to live with the consequences. The next morning, I got a call from Sarah at 7:30. She was sitting in the parking lot of Nashville General Hospital, watching Angela Morrison walk to work through the early morning fog. "She's pretty," Sarah said, and there was something dangerous in her voice. "Younger than me. Blonde. I can see why Derek was attracted to her. Sarah, remember what we talked about. Stay calm. Stay focused." "Oh, I'm focused, Dad. More focused than I've ever been in my life." I spent the morning at the construction site, trying to keep my mind occupied while Sarah handled her part of the plan. But concentration was impossible. Every few minutes, I found myself checking my phone, waiting for updates, imagining all the ways this could go wrong. At 11:15, Sarah called back. "It's done. How did it go?" "Better than I expected." "Much better." Sarah had cornered Angela Morrison in the hospital cafeteria during her coffee break. She'd introduced herself as Derek's wife, shown her the surveillance photos, and very calmly explained exactly what kind of man Angela was involved with. "She didn't believe me at first," Sarah said. "She kept saying Derek had told her he was separated, that the divorce was almost final. So I showed her the insurance documents, the receipts for the poison, the evidence that he was planning to murder my father." "How did she react?" "She threw up. Right there in the cafeteria. And then she started crying. And then she got angry. Angrier than I've ever seen another human being get." It turned out that Angela Morrison wasn't just another naive woman who'd fallen for Derek's lies. She was a nurse practitioner with 15 years of experience, a single mother who'd been raising 2 kids on her own since her divorce 3 years ago. She was smart, independent, and absolutely furious that Derek had been using her. "She wants to help," Sarah said. "She wants to see Derek go down as much as we do." "How?" "She's going to call Derek tonight. She's going to tell him that she's started having complications with the pregnancy, that she needs him to take her to the emergency room. She'll make sure he's nowhere near your house when he's supposed to be at dinner." It was perfect. Derek would be forced to choose between his murder plot and maintaining his lies to Angela. If he chose the murder, Angela would know for certain what kind of man she was dealing with. If he chose Angela, we'd have more time to prepare. Either way, we'd learn something valuable about our enemy. "There's something else," Sarah said. "Angela told me something about Derek's pharmaceutical job. Something that might be important." "What?" "He's not actually in sales. He's a delivery driver. He transports controlled substances between hospitals and pharmacies. That's how he has access to all these drugs. He's been stealing them from shipments." My blood went cold. This wasn't just about Derek trying to poison me. This was about a much larger pattern of criminal behavior. If Derek had been stealing controlled substances, if he'd been using his job to access dangerous drugs, then he was facing federal charges. Prison time that would make a murder conviction look like a parking ticket. Which meant he was more desperate than we thought. And more dangerous. "Sarah, I want you to stay away from the house tonight. Stay with Rebecca or Michael. Don't go anywhere alone, don't." "Dad, stop. I'm not hiding from Derek. We're going to finish this tonight. It's too dangerous. If he's desperate enough to steal federal-controlled substances, there's no telling what he might do if he feels cornered. Then we better make sure we corner him properly." That afternoon, I called Tommy Rodriguez and told him about Derek's drug theft. Tommy whistled low and said he'd make some calls to his contacts at the DA. Within 2 hours, I had a return call from a federal agent named Patricia Quinn who was very interested in Derek Hutchinson's pharmaceutical activities. "Mr. Caldwell, We've been tracking irregularities in controlled substance shipments for 6 months. Several drivers have been flagged for investigation, including your son-in-law. If you can provide evidence of drug theft in addition to the attempted murder charges, we can move very quickly on this case. How quickly? Tomorrow morning, if you get us what we need tonight. Everything was falling into place. Derek was walking into a trap that would destroy not just his freedom, but his entire future. Federal drug charges, attempted murder, insurance fraud. He was looking at spending the rest of his life in prison. All we had to do was get him to try to poison me one more time. At 5 o'clock, Sarah called to confirm that Derek was planning to come to dinner. He told her that Angela's emergency had been a false alarm, that everything was fine, that he was looking forward to spending time with the family. He's lying, of course, Sarah said. Angela never called him. She's at home with her kids, staying as far away from this mess as possible. So he chose murder over covering his lies. Apparently. Which tells us everything we need to know about Derek's priorities. At 6:30, I heard a car in my driveway. I looked out the window and saw Derek's BMW parked next to Sarah's Honda. They were both here, both walking up to my front door, both about to participate in the final act of this deadly little drama. But as I watched them approach, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. Derek was carrying a bottle of wine. And he was smiling. Not his usual pharmaceutical sales smile, but something genuine. Something that looked almost like happiness. The bastard was actually looking forward to killing me. I opened the door before they could knock, putting on my best grandfather performance. Derek! Sarah! Come in, come in. I was just thinking we don't spend enough time together as a family. That's exactly what I was telling Sarah, Derek said, handing me the wine. Family is the most important thing in the world. We should treasure every moment we have together. If I hadn't known what I knew, I might have been touched by the sentiment. Instead, I felt like I was shaking hands with the devil. This looks expensive, I said, examining the bottle. What's the occasion? No occasion. Just wanted to share something special with my father-in-law. Sarah was watching this exchange with fascination, studying Derek like he was a specimen under a microscope. I could see her cataloging every lie, every false gesture, every moment of manufactured warmth. Well, let's open it then, I said. Sarah, would you get the glasses? Actually, Derek said quickly, I brought special glasses. In the car. Let me go get them. He disappeared outside, and Sarah immediately moved close to me. Did you see his face? She whispered. He's actually enjoying this. He's getting pleasure from the idea of killing you. Some people are just born broken, I replied quietly. Derek returned with 2 wine glasses that looked identical to mine, but I noticed he was very careful about which glass went where. He poured the wine himself, making sure I got the glass he'd intended for me. To family, he said, raising his glass. To family, Sarah and I replied. I lifted my glass to my lips, then paused. You know, Derek, I've been thinking about our conversation the other night. About my health, about slowing down. His eyes sharpened immediately. Oh? Yeah. And you were right. A man my age shouldn't be working so hard, shouldn't be carrying so much responsibility. Maybe it's time to start making some changes. What kind of changes? I took a tiny sip of wine, just enough to wet my lips, and set the glass down. Well, I talked to my lawyer today. About updating my will. About making sure the right people are taken care of. Derek's hands were shaking slightly. That's very responsible of you. I thought so. Of course, there are a lot of decisions to make. A lot of factors to consider. I picked up my glass again. Like loyalty. Like trust. Like who really has the family's best interests at heart. I could see sweat beading on Derek's forehead. He was probably calculating how much poison he'd put in the wine, how long it would take to work, whether I'd drunk enough to be effective. Sarah tells me you think I should leave everything to her, I continued. That the other kids don't deserve an equal share. I never said that. Derek protested quickly. Didn't you? I thought you said blood was thicker than water. That family should come first. Of course family should come first. But I would never suggest. It doesn't matter, I interrupted. Because I've already made my decision. The room went completely silent. Derek was holding his breath, waiting to hear whether his murder plot was about to pay off. I'm leaving everything to charity, I said calmly. The whole estate. The business, the house, all of it. Going to build a children's hospital. Derek's face went completely white. Then red. Then white again. You can't do that. Can't I? It's my money, Derek. My business. My decision. But Sarah, your children. My children are adults. They can take care of themselves. And if they can't, well, that's what builds character. Derek looked like he was going to have a stroke. His whole plan, his whole future, everything he'd been counting on, gone. Just like that. But then something shifted in his expression. Something cold and calculating. He looked at my wine glass, still mostly full, and I could see him doing math in his head. You should drink your wine, he said quietly. It's really exceptional. I'm not much of a wine drinker these days. Just a sip. To toast the future. This was it. This was the moment. Derek was about to push me to drink the poison, right in front of Sarah, right in front of the cameras. He was going to give us everything we needed to put him away forever. I lifted the glass to my lips one more time, and Derek leaned forward intently. That's when Sarah's phone rang. Sarah looked at her phone screen, and I saw her eyes widen. It's Angela Morrison, she said, and Derek's face went dead white. Don't answer it, Derek said quickly. Too quickly. Why not? Sarah asked, her voice perfectly innocent. I don't even know who that is. But she was already answering the phone, putting it on speaker so we could all hear. Hello? Is this Sarah Hutchinson? The voice was young, female, and absolutely terrified. Yes, this is Sarah. Who is this? This is Angela Morrison. I'm calling about Derek. About your husband. Derek looked like he was going to throw up. Sarah looked at him with perfect, manufactured confusion. I'm sorry, I don't understand. How do you know my husband? Because I'm pregnant with his baby. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek's mouth was opening and closing like a fish out of water, and I could practically see his brain short-circuiting as his carefully constructed lies collapsed around him. I'm sorry, Sarah said, still playing her part perfectly. I think there's been some mistake. Derek and I are married. We're having dinner with my father right now. There's no mistake. I have pictures. I have text messages. I have hotel receipts. Derek has been telling me for 8 months that he's separated from you, that the divorce is almost final, that we're going to get married after the baby is born. Sarah looked at Derek with an expression of pure shock and betrayal. If I hadn't known she was acting, I would have believed she was hearing this for the first time. Derek? Derek, what is she talking about? Derek finally found his voice. She's lying. She's crazy. I don't even know who this woman is. You don't know me? Angela's voice turned cold. Then how do you explain this recording? Suddenly Derek's voice was coming through the phone speaker, clear as a bell. I love you, Angela. As soon as Sarah signs the divorce papers, we can be together officially. You and me and the baby. A real family. I watched Derek's face crumble as he realized that Angela had been recording their conversations. Probably for weeks. Probably documenting everything he told her about his marriage, his plans, his schemes. There's more, Angela continued. A lot more. Including conversations about how you're planning to get money for our new life together. Something about insurance and your wife's father having an accident. Derek lunged for the phone, but Sarah was faster. She pulled it away from him and stood up, backing toward the kitchen. Angela, could you hold on for just a moment? I need to have a conversation with my husband. Of course. Take all the time you need. Sarah hit the mute button and stared at Derek with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating, absolutely merciless. So, she said quietly, insurance fraud and murder. That's your plan for our future? Sarah, I can explain. Explain what? Explain how you've been cheating on me for months? Explain how you got another woman pregnant while planning to kill my father? Explain how you just tried to poison him right in front of me? Derek's eyes darted to my wine glass, still sitting on the table, still mostly full. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Because I have cameras, Derek. I have video of you putting something in Dad's wine. Just like I have video of you doing the same thing last Sunday. The fight went out of Derek completely. He slumped in his chair, looking like a man who just realized his execution date had been moved up. How long have you known? He asked quietly. Long enough. Long enough to document everything. Long enough to build a case that will put you away for the rest of your life. Sarah, please. We can work this out. We can. Work what out? The attempted murder? The insurance fraud? The affair? The fact that you're going to be a father with another woman? Sarah's voice was rising now, all her carefully controlled anger finally breaking through. Which part of this did you think we could work out? Derek looked at me desperately. Jerry, you have to understand. I was desperate. The debts, the pressure, I didn't know what else to do. So you decided to murder me. It wasn't supposed to be murder. It was supposed to look like natural causes. A heart attack. Peaceful. Quick. With digitalis, I said quietly. Enough to stop my heart but not enough to show up in a routine autopsy. His eyes widened. How did you? Because I'm not the helpless old man you thought I was. I stood up and walked over to where Derek was sitting. He looked up at me with the expression of a cornered animal, dangerous and unpredictable. Derek, you made 3 critical mistakes. First, you underestimated me. Second, you underestimated my daughter. And third, you thought you could build a new life on top of my corpse without anyone noticing. I'm sorry. God, Jerry, I'm so sorry. I never wanted it to come to this. But it did come to this. And now you have to face the consequences. Sarah unmuted the phone. Angela? Are you still there? I'm here. I want you to know that everything you told me was true. Derek has been lying to both of us. But I also want you to know that it's over now. The lies, the manipulation, all of it. It's over. What happens now? Now Derek goes to prison for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and federal drug theft. And you get to raise your baby without a liar and a would-be killer in your life. Drug theft? Derek's voice cracked. Oh, did I forget to mention that? Sarah smiled coldly. We know about the controlled substances you've been stealing from your delivery route. The DA is very interested in talking to you about that. Derek buried his face in his hands. Jesus Christ. How did everything go so wrong? Everything went wrong the moment you decided my father's life was worth less than your comfort, Sarah replied. Everything went wrong the moment you brought poison into this house. Everything went wrong the moment you chose greed over family. I looked at this man, this pathetic, desperate, dangerous man who'd been willing to murder me for money, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger. Not hatred. Just profound sadness for what he'd thrown away. You had everything, Derek. A beautiful wife, a good family, a chance to build something real. And you destroyed it all for money you didn't even need. I didn't need it. You don't understand the pressure I was under, the debts, the threats. So you decided to threaten me instead. Derek looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. What happens now? Now we call the police. Now you get arrested. Now you spend the rest of your life paying for what you tried to do. And Sarah? What about Sarah? My daughter looked at her husband with an expression of complete disgust. Sarah gets to start over. Sarah gets to divorce a would-be murderer and move on with her life. Sarah gets to rebuild everything you tried to destroy. The baby, Angela's baby, is not your concern anymore. Sarah said firmly. Angela will raise that child without you. Better without you. Derek sat there in my dining room, surrounded by the wreckage of his schemes and lies, and I watched him realize that he'd lost everything. His wife, his freedom, his future, his child, all of it gone because he'd been too greedy and too stupid to understand that some things are worth more than money. But here's the thing about predators: they don't give up easily. Even when they're caught, even when they're cornered, they'll try one last desperate move. Derek's last desperate move was reaching into his jacket pocket. I saw his hand moving before Sarah did. I saw him pull out another vial, this one filled with clear liquid. I saw him twist off the cap and raise it to his lips. "Derek, no!" Sarah screamed. But I was faster. I knocked the vial out of his hand, and it shattered on the kitchen floor, spreading whatever poison he'd intended for himself across the linoleum. "You don't get to take the easy way out," I told him. "You don't get to escape justice by killing yourself. You're going to face what you've done. You're going to live with it." Derek looked at the broken glass, at the wasted poison, at the last remnant of his power scattered across my kitchen floor. Then he looked at me and Sarah, and I saw something break behind his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry for all of it." "Sorry doesn't bring back trust," Sarah said quietly. "Sorry doesn't undo attempted murder. Sorry doesn't fix anything." That's when we heard the sirens. The police arrived in waves. First the local sheriff's deputies, then the state police, then the federal agents who'd been tracking Derek's drug thefts. My quiet dining room became a crime scene, with photographers and evidence technicians documenting every detail of Derek's failed murder plot. Agent Patricia Quinn was exactly what you'd expect from a DA investigator, sharp-eyed, no-nonsense, and absolutely relentless when it came to building a case. She listened to our story without interrupting, reviewed the video footage from Sarah's hidden cameras, and examined the poisoned wine with the kind of professional interest that made my skin crawl. "Mr. Hutchinson," she said, reading Derek his rights, "you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and violation of the Controlled Substances Act. You have the right to remain silent." Derek didn't remain silent. In fact, once the handcuffs clicked into place, he started talking like a man with nothing left to lose. Which, I suppose, he was. He confessed to everything. The poison attempts, the stolen drugs, the insurance fraud scheme, even details we hadn't discovered yet. Apparently, he'd been skimming controlled substances for over a year, selling them to Vincent Coretti to pay off his gambling debts. The murder plot had been his way of eliminating those debts permanently while setting himself up for life. "I never meant for it to go this far," he kept saying. "I just needed money. I just needed a way out." "There's always a way out that doesn't involve murder," Agent Quinn replied coldly. "You chose not to take it." As they led Derek away in handcuffs, he looked back at Sarah one last time. "I did love you," he said. "Whatever else you believe, I did love you." Sarah watched the police car disappear down my driveway, then turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Do you think that's true? Do you think he really loved me? I think Derek loved the idea of you. The lifestyle you represented, the security, the respectability. But real love doesn't plan murder, honey. Real love doesn't betray and deceive and destroy." Over the next few weeks, the full scope of Derek's crimes became clear. The federal investigation revealed that he'd stolen over $200,000 worth of controlled substances, selling everything from morphine to fentanyl to whoever would pay cash. The insurance fraud scheme involved multiple policies on multiple family members, including Sarah herself. But here's what really got to me. Derek had been planning this for almost 2 years. Long before the gambling debts, long before Vincent Coretti, long before the desperation he claimed had driven him to attempted murder. The earliest internet searches on his computer dated back to 6 months after he married Sarah. He'd been researching ways to kill his in-laws almost from the beginning of their marriage. "It was always about money," Sarah said when the prosecutors showed us the evidence. "From the day he proposed, it was always about what he could get from our family." The trial took 8 months. Derek's lawyer tried every defense in the book: temporary insanity, financial duress, addiction, even claiming that Derek had been coerced by Vincent Coretti. None of it worked. The evidence was too overwhelming, the video footage too clear, the testimony too consistent. I had to testify, of course. Had to sit in that witness box and describe watching my son-in-law try to poison me in my own home. Had to explain how it felt to realize that someone I'd welcomed into my family was planning my death. "Mr. Caldwell," the prosecutor asked, "how has this experience affected your relationship with your daughter?" I looked over at Sarah, sitting in the gallery with her head held high despite everything she'd been through. "It's made me proud of her," I said. "Proud of her strength, her intelligence, her refusal to let anyone destroy our family. Derek thought he could manipulate her, use her, control her. He was wrong about that too." The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they came back, the foreman read the verdicts with the kind of solemn gravity that tells you everything you need to know. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder in the first degree. Conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. Trafficking in controlled substances. The sentence was life in prison without the possibility of parole. Derek showed no emotion when the verdict was read. He just sat there, staring at his hands, probably finally understanding that his choices had consequences he couldn't charm or manipulate his way out of. But the real justice came 3 months later, in a way I never expected. Angela Morrison had her baby, a healthy little girl she named Hope. She sent Sarah a picture with a note that said, "Thank you for saving us from him." The baby was beautiful, with Derek's dark hair but Angela's kind eyes. She'd never know her biological father, and that was probably a blessing. Vincent Coretti, the loan shark Derek had been paying with stolen drugs, was arrested as part of the federal investigation. Turned out he'd been Derek's customer, not his creditor. Derek had been lying about the gambling debts too, using them as cover for his real addiction: greed. The house Derek and Sarah had shared was sold to pay legal fees and restitution. Sarah moved back to Tennessee, bought a little place near mine, and started over. She was stronger now, harder in some ways, but also more authentic. The experience had burned away her naivety and left something pure and unbreakable behind. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked her one evening as we sat on my porch, watching the sunset paint the hills gold. "Regret what?" "Not letting him drink that poison. Not letting him take the easy way out." Sarah was quiet for a long time, thinking about the question with the careful consideration she brought to everything now. "No," she said finally. "He needed to face what he'd done. He needed to understand that actions have consequences. And more importantly, other people needed to see that you can't just destroy families for profit and walk away." 6 months later, I got a letter from Derek in prison. He'd found religion, apparently. Born again, filled with remorse, asking for forgiveness for his sins. The letter was 12 pages long, filled with biblical quotations and tear-stained apologies. I read it once, then threw it in the trash. Some things can't be forgiven. Some betrayals cut too deep for redemption. Derek had looked me in the eye and smiled while planning my death. He'd used my daughter's love as a weapon against our entire family. He'd been willing to orphan grandchildren and destroy lives for nothing more than money. Religion might offer him comfort in his cell, but it couldn't undo what he'd done. It couldn't restore the trust he'd shattered or heal the wounds he'd inflicted. It couldn't give back the innocence Sarah had lost when she discovered what kind of man she'd married. But here's what I learned from the whole experience: evil isn't always obvious. It doesn't always announce itself with horns and pitchforks. Sometimes it comes to your dinner table with a smile and a bottle of wine. Sometimes it marries your daughter and calls you Dad, and pretends to care about your health while planning your funeral. The truly dangerous people in this world aren't the obvious villains. They're the ones who look like everyone else, who blend in, who make you trust them before they destroy you. They're the ones who understand that the best way to commit a crime is to make sure nobody suspects you're capable of it. Derek Hutchinson was that kind of evil. Patient, calculating, hidden behind a facade of respectability and charm. If I hadn't happened to be watching at exactly the right moment, If I hadn't seen him slip that poison into my wine, I'd be dead now. Sarah would be a widow, probably remarried to her father's killer, never knowing that her husband had murdered the man who raised her. But I did see him. And Sarah was stronger than he'd expected. And together, we made sure he faced justice for what he'd tried to do. 2 years after Derek's conviction, I thought the story was over. I was wrong. Because the thing about throwing stones into still water is that the ripples keep spreading long after the stone has sunk to the bottom. The first ripple came in the form of a phone call from Maria Santos, the private investigator who'd helped us build the case against Derek. "Jerry, I need to talk to you. In person. There's something you need to know." She drove out to my house that same afternoon, carrying a thick file folder that looked ominously familiar. Maria had aged in the 2 years since Derek's trial, more gray in her hair, deeper lines around her eyes. "This business takes its toll on everyone." "What is it?" I asked, pouring coffee in my kitchen. Derek wasn't working alone. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean?" "I mean the insurance fraud scheme was bigger than we thought. Much bigger. Derek was just one part of a network that's been operating across 3 states, targeting elderly family members for murder." She opened the file and spread out photographs, documents, financial records. Names and faces I didn't recognize, but all connected by the same pattern: younger family members taking out large life insurance policies on older relatives, then arranging convenient accidents, or natural deaths. "How many victims?" "That we know of?" 17. "That we suspect?" "Maybe twice that many." My hands were shaking as I looked through the evidence. 17 families destroyed by greed. 17 elderly people murdered by their own relatives. 17 Derek Hutchinsons who thought they could get away with it. "The FBI is calling it Operation Family Tree," Maria continued. "Derek's arrest led them to Vincent Coretti, who wasn't just buying stolen drugs. He was providing murder services to anyone willing to pay. Coretti had a whole network: doctors who would falsify death certificates, funeral directors who would skip autopsies, insurance adjusters who would expedite claims. And Derek was part of this. Derek was recruited 2 years ago when his gambling debts got too high. Coretti offered him a way out: kill you, collect the insurance money, pay off the debts, and take a percentage of the payout. If it worked, Derek would be brought into the bigger operation. I felt sick. This wasn't just about my son-in-law's greed anymore. This was about a systematic conspiracy to murder elderly people for profit. And I'd almost become victim number 18. "There's more," Maria said quietly. "Sarah's in danger." "What do you mean?" "Derek talked in prison. He gave up names, dates, methods. The other members of the network know he was caught because you and Sarah were too smart, too suspicious, too prepared. They see your family as a threat." The second ripple came 3 days later. Sarah's car was vandalized outside her law office, all 4 tires slashed and the word, "snitch," spray-painted across the windshield. That night someone threw a brick through her living room window with a note tied around it. "Shut up or join your father." The third ripple was Angela Morrison's phone call, her voice shaking with terror. "Someone's been following me. Watching my house. Asking questions about Hope at her daycare. They know about Derek, about the trial, about what he told the FBI." I called Agent Quinn immediately. Within 24 hours, Sarah, Angela, and I were in protective custody while the FBI rounded up the rest of Coretti's network. 18 arrests across Tennessee, Kentucky, and Alabama. Doctors, funeral directors, insurance agents, and family members who'd sold their souls for blood money. But the biggest shock came when they arrested Dr. Marcus Webb, Derek's family physician and the man who'd been supplying medical advice for the murders. "Dr. Webb is the one who told Derek about Digitalis," Agent Quinn explained. "He's been providing consultation services for the whole network. How to kill people without leaving obvious evidence, how to make murders look like natural deaths, which drugs work best for specific scenarios. A doctor, a man who'd taken an oath to, first, do no harm, was helping people murder their own families for insurance money. How long had this been going on? At least 5 years. We've connected Dr. Webb to 12 definite murders and probably twice that many cases where the deaths were ruled natural but now look suspicious. The scope of it was staggering. Dozens of families destroyed, dozens of elderly people murdered by their own relatives, all coordinated by a network that treated human life as nothing more than a commodity to be harvested for profit. What happens now? I asked. Now you testify again. All of you. Derek's case was just the beginning. We need you to help us put away the rest of this network. And that's exactly what we did. For the next 18 months, my life became a series of courtrooms and depositions and testimony about the night Derek tried to poison me. Sarah testified about finding the evidence, about confronting Derek, about the moment she realized her husband was a killer. Angela testified about Derek's lies, his promises, his manipulation. But the most powerful testimony came from the families of the other victims. Elderly men and women who'd been murdered by their own children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews. People who'd trusted their killers completely, right up until the moment they died. Mrs. Eleanor Hartman, 78 years old, poisoned by her grandson with insulin. She'd raised him after his parents died, put him through college, loved him like her own son. Mr. Frank Rodriguez, 81 years old, pushed down a flight of stairs by his daughter-in-law who then claimed he'd fallen. He'd been paying for his grandchildren's education, proud to help the family succeed. Ms. Betty Chin, 74 years old, given a fatal dose of heart medication by her nephew who was supposed to be caring for her after hip surgery. She'd left him her house and her will, grateful for his devotion. 17 stories of betrayal, greed, and calculated murder. 17 families destroyed by people who put money above love, profit above loyalty, self-interest above human decency. The trials took 2 years. In the end, 14 people were convicted of first-degree murder. Dr. Webb got life without parole for his role as the network's medical consultant. Vincent Coretti got the death penalty for organizing the whole operation. And Derek? Derek spent those 2 years in solitary confinement, partly for his own protection and partly because he kept trying to make deals with prosecutors. Every few months, his lawyer would contact the FBI with new information, new names, new details about the network's operations. He's trying to trade his way out of a life sentence, Agent Quinn told me. Problem is, he doesn't have anything valuable enough to make that kind of deal. The final ripple came on a Tuesday morning in March, almost 3 years after that first poison dinner. I was sitting in my kitchen, reading the newspaper and drinking coffee, when the phone rang. Mr. Caldwell? This is Warden Phillips at Riverbend Maximum Security Institution. I'm calling about Derek Hutchinson. My blood went cold. What about him? He's dead, sir. Apparent suicide. He was found in his cell this morning. Derek had finally found his way out. After years of trying to negotiate, manipulate, and charm his way to freedom, he'd taken the same path he tried to take in my dining room that night. The easy way out. How? I asked. He'd been saving up his heart medication for weeks, apparently. Took the whole supply at once. By the time the guards found him, it was too late. Heart medication. Even in death, Derek couldn't resist the irony. I called Sarah immediately. She listened to the news in silence, then asked the question I'd been expecting. How do you feel about it? Honestly? I feel cheated. He got to escape justice after all. Did he, though? He spent 3 years in prison, knowing he'd destroyed everything he'd ever cared about. He lost his freedom, his wife, his child, his future. And in the end, he died alone in a concrete cell, knowing that everyone who'd ever loved him now knew exactly what kind of monster he really was. Sarah was right, of course. Derek had faced consequences, even if he'd ultimately escaped the full measure of justice. But his death marked the end of something for our family, the end of looking over our shoulders, the end of waiting for the next threat, the end of living in the shadow of his crimes. There's something else, I told Sarah. Something I need to tell you about Derek. What? The night he died, he left a letter. The warden is sending it to you. I don't want to read it. You don't have to. But you should know what it says. He confessed to everything, not just what he'd done to us, but to the other families too. He gave details about murders we didn't even know about. His final act was helping put away the last few members of the network. Why would he do that? I think, in the end, he finally understood what he'd become. And he couldn't live with it anymore. Derek's final letter helped convict 3 more killers and brought closure to families who'd been waiting years for answers about their loved ones' deaths. It wasn't redemption, nothing could undo the evil he'd committed, but it was something. In the months that followed, life slowly returned to normal. Sarah started dating again, a good man this time, a teacher who loved her for her strength and intelligence rather than her potential inheritance. Angela finished nursing school and moved to Colorado with Hope, starting fresh in a place where nobody knew about Derek, or the trials or any of it. And me? I kept building. Kept working construction sites, kept employing people who needed jobs, kept trying to leave the world a little better than I'd found it. Because that's what you do when you've seen evil up close, you fight it with goodness, darkness with light, death with life. But I never forgot the lessons Derek taught me. I never forgot that evil can wear a friendly face, that trust has to be earned, that the people closest to you can sometimes be the most dangerous. And I never forgot that when someone declares war on your family, you don't fight fair. You fight to win. 5 years have passed since Derek Hutchinson tried to poison me at Sunday dinner. 5 years since my family was torn apart by greed and betrayal and put back together by love and justice. 5 years since I learned that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about making sure the people you love are safe, the truth gets told, and evil faces consequences. I'm 77 years old now. My hands shake a little more than they used to, my back aches on cold mornings, and I need glasses to read anything smaller than a highway sign. But I'm still here. Still breathing, still building, still fighting the good fight every day. Sarah remarried 2 years ago to James Mitchell, the high school teacher I mentioned. Their wedding was small, quiet, nothing like the elaborate ceremony she'd had with Derek. But it was real in a way that first marriage never was. James loves Sarah for who she is, not what she can give him. He knows her story, understands her strength, and never tries to diminish either one. They're expecting their first child next month, a little girl they're planning to name Elizabeth, after Sarah's mother. My first grandchild. The thought of holding her, of teaching her about the world, of watching her grow up safe and loved in a family built on trust rather than lies, it makes every day worth living. Angela Morrison sent me a Christmas card this year with pictures of Hope, who's now 4 years old, and looks nothing like her father. She's got Angela's smile, Angela's kindness, and no knowledge of the darkness she was born from. Angela never told her about Derek, never will. As far as Hope knows, her father was a good man who died before she was born. Sometimes the kindest gift you can give a child is a lie that protects them from ugly truths. The construction business is thriving. I've got 43 employees now, most of them young men and women who remind me of myself at their age, hungry, determined, willing to work hard for an honest living. I pay them well, treat them fairly, and try to teach them that building something with your hands is one of the most satisfying things a person can do. But I've also made changes. Security cameras throughout the office and job sites. Background checks on all employees, especially anyone who handles finances. Insurance policies with multiple beneficiaries to prevent any single person from profiting too much from my death. Call it paranoia if you want, but I call it wisdom earned through experience. Tommy Rodriguez retired from the police force but still does consulting work for the FBI on cases involving family murder schemes. Turns out Derek's network wasn't unique. There are similar operations across the country, targeting elderly people with significant assets and relatives greedy enough to kill for money. It's the perfect crime, Tommy told me over coffee last month. The victims trust their killers completely. The murders look like natural deaths. The killers inherit everything legally. If Derek hadn't been so sloppy, if you hadn't been so observant, he probably would have gotten away with it. How many others do you think succeeded? Hundreds. Maybe thousands. These schemes have been operating for decades, and we're only now starting to understand how widespread they are. It's a sobering thought. How many elderly people have died at the hands of their own families without anyone ever knowing? How many Derek Hutchinsons are sitting in church pews and family reunions, planning their next victim's death? But here's what I've learned in my 77 years. You can't save everyone. You can't stop all the evil in the world. All you can do is protect your own family, tell the truth when you have the chance, and make sure that when evil comes for you, you're ready to fight back. Maria Santos still runs her private investigation business, though she's become something of a specialist in family murder cases. She works with the FBI now, training agents to recognize the warning signs of inheritance-motivated killings. She says my case was a turning point in her career, the first time she'd been able to prevent a murder rather than just solving one after the fact. You and Sarah saved each other, she told me. Derek was counting on you being isolated, helpless, trusting. Instead, he found a family that fought back. Dr. Marcus Webb died in prison 2 years ago, killed by an inmate whose grandfather had been one of Webb's victims. I can't say I mourned his passing. Some people forfeit their right to sympathy when they choose to help others commit murder. Vincent Coretti is still on death row, filing appeal after appeal, trying to overturn his conviction. His network has been completely dismantled, its members dead or imprisoned. But I know there are others out there. Other Vincent Carrot is building other networks, targeting other families. The war between good and evil never really ends. It just changes battlefields. But there have been victories too. The insurance companies have changed their policies, making it much harder for family members to take out large life insurance policies without the knowledge and consent of the insured person. Law enforcement agencies are better trained to recognize suspicious patterns of elderly deaths. Prosecutors are more aggressive about pursuing inheritance-motivated murder cases. And families like mine, families that have been targeted and survived, we're more vigilant now. We share information, support each other, make sure that no one has to face this kind of betrayal alone. I get letters sometimes from people who've read about our case in the newspapers or seen the story on television. People who suspect that their own family members might be planning something similar. People who've noticed strange behavior, suspicious questions about wills and insurance, unexplained interest in their health and finances. I answer every letter. I give them Maria Santos's contact information. I tell them to trust their instincts, to document everything, to never ignore warning signs just because they seem too terrible to be true. Because the thing about evil is that it counts on good people not believing it exists. It counts on victims being too trusting, too naive, too loving to recognize danger coming from someone they care about. Derek counted on all of that. He counted on me being a helpless old man who would never suspect his own son-in-law of attempted murder. He counted on Sarah being too devoted a wife to question her husband's motives. He counted on our family being too normal, too decent, too innocent to recognize a predator in our midst. He was wrong about all of it. Last Sunday, I had dinner with Sarah and James at their house. Sarah cooked pot roast, just like she used to at my place. We sat around their dining room table, talking about the baby, about work, about plans for the future. Normal family conversation, filled with love and laughter and hope. But I noticed something that made me proud. Sarah opened the wine herself. She served the food herself. She never let anyone else handle anything that was going into her body or mine. The experience with Derek had taught her to be careful, to be watchful, to never again trust anyone completely with her family's safety. Some people might call that sad. I call it wisdom. After dinner, Sarah walked me out to my truck. It was a beautiful Tennessee evening, warm and clear, with stars just starting to appear in the darkening sky. "Dad," she said, "I want you to know something." "What's that, honey?" "If Derek had succeeded, if he'd actually killed you that night, I would have spent the rest of my life married to your murderer. I would have had children with him. I would have built a life on top of your grave, and I never would have known the truth. But he didn't succeed. We stopped him." "We did. But what if we hadn't? What if you hadn't been watching? What if you drunk that wine?" I thought about that for a moment, imagining how different everything would be if Derek's plan had worked. The grief Sarah would have felt, thinking she'd lost her father to natural causes. The children she might have had with a killer. The life she would have lived, built on lies and murder and blood money. Then Derek would have won, I said finally. Evil would have triumphed. And that's exactly why we couldn't let it happen. Do you think there are others out there? Other families going through what we went through? I know there are. But I also know there are families like ours, families that fight back, that refuse to be victims, that make sure evil faces consequences. Sarah hugged me tight, and I could feel her strength, her resilience, her absolute determination to protect the family she was building with James. I love you, Dad. I love you too, honey. More than you'll ever know. As I drove home through the Tennessee hills, I thought about legacy, about what we leave behind when we're gone, about the battles we fight and the victories we win, about the children we protect and the evil we defeat. Derek Hutchinson wanted to be remembered as a successful businessman, a devoted husband, a respected member of the community. Instead, he'll be remembered as a would-be murderer who died alone in a prison cell, destroyed by his own greed and betrayal. I want to be remembered differently. I want to be remembered as a man who fought back when evil came for his family. A man who refused to be a victim, who turned the tables on his would-be killer, who made sure justice was served. But most of all, I want to be remembered as a grandfather who made sure his granddaughter grew up in a world where love was stronger than greed, where family bonds couldn't be broken by money, where good people stood together against the darkness. That's the legacy I'm building, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of protection and love at a time. And if you've listened to this whole story, if you've heard every word of this tale of betrayal and revenge and ultimate justice, then I want you to remember something: evil exists. It's real, it's patient, and it's always looking for its next victim. But good exists too. Love exists. Justice exists. And when good people stand together, when they refuse to be victims, when they fight back against those who would destroy them, evil loses. Every single time. So watch out for your family. Trust your instincts. And if someone you love ever looks you in the eye and smiles while planning your destruction, remember Derek Hutchinson. Remember that predators can wear friendly faces. Remember that the most dangerous enemy is often the one sitting at your own dinner table. And remember that you don't have to be a victim. You can fight back. You can win. Because family is worth fighting for. Truth is worth fighting for. Justice is worth fighting for. And in the end, that's all that really matters. If this story has touched you, if it's made you think about your own family and your own safety, then share it. Subscribe to hear more stories like this one. Comment below and tell me about your own experiences with family betrayal or the triumph of good over evil. Because these stories need to be told. These lessons need to be learned. And these warnings need to be heard. Evil is counting on your silence. Don't give it what it wants.